when you were 9, your family immigrated from Vietnam to San Francisco because of the Vietnam War. And I wonder, given how young you were, what that transition like and what it was like growing up in the heart of the Bay Area where all the tech innovation like Google, Amazon, Facebook were at.
I still have some memories about being a kid in Vietnam, but quite frankly, traveling or changing country or an environment for a child is never like such a hugely pleasant thing, right? You kind of like crave that stability. But I grew up in a very, very loving family with parents and older siblings. And so that really was a great foundation for any change. So I really feel very fortunate that I had the childhood in a different country, but that the latter years of my childhood was in America.
Did you love dispute resolution? And was that why you chose law in the end?
I was watching a few shows on just American televisions. As you know, in Asia, law is not as big a profession in terms of its place in society. But in the US, you can turn on the TV and there are like 8 different TV shows about lawyers arguing. And I love just like the human dynamics. And I think one of the things that drew me to it is the ability to influence, to like make a difference. Of course, you're fixing someone or making someone feel better in the hospital. That's a very impactful way. But there's something fun about watching people who dress up in court and talk for half an hour and change people's opinions. So I think how I got interested in law was by watching TV shows.
So what was the thought process behind you doing neuroscience in your undergrad and then eventually doing law in Berkeley and Oxford?
Yes. So even though I've always wanted to be a lawyer growing up, like that is in middle school and high school. For my parents, they were like, you got to be a doctor or an engineer because law wasn't something that they were as familiar with. And so the notion is not that you had to, it's that it's very clear that there's a strong preference. You know, if you're a good son and are going to have a successful role in society, that's your 2 choices. And so even though I ended up studying part of law, neuroscience was the foundation that, hey, if I wanted to, I could then go to medical school. So as entering college, I was like, all right, neuroscience, I like people, I like law, and this is a deep science space that would be the undergraduate degree, because being a medical doctor is a doctorate degree in the US. You need an undergrad, you take the MCAT, and then you go to medical school. Because of that, I ended up studying neuroscience as an undergrad to keep myself options later on in life or 4 years later.
So you end up becoming a securities and patent litigator at Goodwin Proctor. Why was that? Did you know from day one that this wasn't where you wanted to be for the rest of your life?
On day one, I knew it wasn't what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life, though I was thrilled to be doing it. So I skipped a couple of grades, but ended up still deciding to go to law school. And my family ended up was being very supportive of it. I think me being the last one of 5 had a lot to do with it. Had I been the oldest one, I think the pressure to do medical school would have been high, and I would have been a terrible doctor. I hate blood. I don't like the neon lighting in any environment, certainly not the hospital environment. And when people are not well, I feel sad, but I also feel down, you know? So I would have made a horrible medical doctor or a scientist for that matter. So luckily, I ended up pursuing law, and the career for law in the US is also pretty unique. You got to get into like the bigger firm because they pay more and they're more prestigious. And so I tried Goodwin Proctor. On day one, I knew that I need to learn all that I could, but being a lawyer in a large law firm wasn't for me. That's why I was doing patent litigation, securities litigation, and then some merger and acquisition, which is a very different area of the law that people typically don't combine, just to, again, broaden my horizon, opening up possibilities.
So how did you end up deciding to go in-house to one of the largest asset management companies in the States?
Luck in that most of the time, it would be a dream transition for a large firm attorney to go in-house, particularly at a hedge fund or an investment firm. But it would take like 10 years or so. So someone after 2, 3 years through a strings of events that looking back, I felt quite lucky that people took a risk and opened the door for me. But I ended up becoming the chief US counsel for a very large firms right in the middle of the financial recession in 2008. In life, 50% of everything that you do, at least 50%, luck and outside of your control, the good and the bad.
It must have been tough because you were managing over $40 billion in assets.
During the greatest economic recession that the world has seen since the 1930s, with Lehman Brothers and whatnot as counterparties. So I don't think I slept very much. I think I slept like probably 3 nights a week. Without jokes, actually, every other night was like an all-nighter for a good 6 months or so.
So after that lifestyle, do you think that's it? I want to go into the academia.
It wasn't the pace of work that encouraged me to do something else. It was that it was getting less meaningful. I've always been able to find the energy in me to work long hours on things that I'm passionate about. But it's the meaning, the purposeful feeling behind certain things. After 2 years at the firm, I was like, all right, now that the economy is more stable, things are getting back to the normal routine. You move a lot of money back and forth, and the learning curve has plateaued out. So it felt to me like, is this the best thing I can be doing, with life? And I started to look around, and that was in New York. My family, I grew up in California. Everyone's in California. Started out my law career and was in finance in New York City. And at the time, I had not been seen my parents very much since law school. And so I was like, hey, I think I want to move back to California and spend a little bit more time with my parents who were and are getting older. And an opportunity came up to be in academia. And my parents were in academia as well, college, high school, but they were teachers and professors. And I was like, wow, this would be kind of cool. Since I didn't make it as a doctor or an engineer, maybe I'll be the only one in the family to do something that they had done before, which is teaching. But that's how I ended up coming back to Stanford Law School and the business school as a teaching fellow for a few years.
You came back to be a teaching fellow at a time when the Dodd-Frank Act was passed. So that must have been a very interesting time for you.
And another coincidence in life, right? Because to go back into an academic environment in law and jurisprudence just happened to be at a time when there was a lot of changes in regulatory structure. I call it the legal evolution in the US. So in that capacity, got to get very involved and meet a lot of people who were instrumental in crafting a lot of these rules and regulations at the federal level in the US. And all of it had to do with securities, with how do you sell and buy stock, how do you prevent investors from getting exposed and cheated, which caused the Great Recession and the Great Depression, and the conversation around that. So it was really, I couldn't have planned for the timing, the value of what it ended up providing me.
Were you constantly seeking what else you could do next? Because at the same time, you co-founded a consulting practice and you were also CEO of Kanbar Enterprise.
Ling, I think in life, all of us all have the desire to be more. That is not just human beings. I think every insect, every plant, every flower always strive to be more. That's why after you have that first car, some people want to have a second car. That's why, the lions and the birds keep on eating and growing bigger. So the desire to be more, I think, is universal of life. Now, how do you express it? That's a whole different thread. And I think in the academic environment, it was amazing intellectually, but the pace of life was very slow. I used to the New York pace of life, of Wall Street, of finance, of big law. So I ended up finding myself with some extra time, and whether to spend that extra time doing more academic research, I'm like, well, why don't I try, get my feet wet in something else? And that's how almost concurrently also got involved in business and gained some business experience from the perspective of not a lawyer, but as an operator, of going out there, building businesses as a COO for a very large organization. It was Kanbar Enterprises at the time. But I think at the end of the day, it's still driven by the one common thread, which is we all want to be more than what we are today.
And I think that drive also led you to start a nonprofit that was helping underserved children in Asia, especially Vietnam.
Yes, people only see the things that work, but people don't see the things that didn't work. Or I must have started in different forums, 5, 6 different initiatives, some nonprofit, some for-profit, that did not work before, eventually founding Republic. But yes, I did have a nonprofit that was collecting money and directing them to schools in Asia, Vietnam and Indonesia at the beginning. But the internet and social media, which is still so new, and that over time, we just didn't have the traction that made sense. And so know when to fold things is also, I think, looking back, an important aspect of being a founder.
So you ran that for 2 years before you decided to fold it. And I think that's when the AngelList opportunity came through Stanford. How did that happen?
Well, AngelList had some legal challenges at the time because what they were doing was very new and it didn't quite conform with certain aspects of US laws. So they had some significant legal challenges. They were looking to hire their general counsel, actually the first non-engineer hire that they've ever made. And my advisor at the time, my mentor at the time at Stanford, was also an advisor for AngelList. I got introduced, and at the beginning, I was not interested in becoming the general counsel because I was thinking if I just want to be a lawyer again, I go back to New York at a large fund. Why would I join a startup? But a startup is so different in its structure in that it gives every employee a lot more flexibility and possibility. So Naval, the founder of AngelList, told me that like, hey, you don't have to just be a lawyer. You can take on whatever project that you want insofar that you hire people to make all of the legal issues under control. And so in addition to becoming an AngelList GC, I led their expansion into Canada and into Europe and launched a bunch of products. But it was probably the first job after like 5 years out of law school that had shown me that the law in the US, everything is up for changes, that you can change and shift everything. Nothing is static. But coming from the New York big law environment, you think that things are just what they are, they can never change. And that's not true. And I think entrepreneurship, particularly Silicon Valley, is so good at distilling and conveying that message.
And you joined AngelList at a time where it was rolling out its syndication model. So what was the kind of work that you were doing there?
AngelList is as much a legal tech company as it is a financial tech. Syndication simply means that how do you make it possible for 100 people to invest into a company, but it shows up as one investor on the company's cap table or document, because no company wants to deal with 100 new investor all at once. So how to structure legal documents and make it cheap enough to do that over and over and over again. That's the AngelList syndication model.
AngelList was also very active in lobbying for the Jobs Act, which is very crucial to the founding of Republic. Can you share a bit about when you first heard about it and what you thought the implications were when it would come into force?
Yes, so this is in the years between 2011 to 2014, and this is a lot of changes under President Obama. And so after the Great Recession in the US, the government had a lot of mandate to implement see-through changes in financial regulation. The Jobs Act and Dodd-Frank is just a body of law that probably more impactful or more far-reaching than anything that we had seen in the 50 years before that. So it changes every aspect of how you buy and trade and sell public securities as well as private. So there's one main thing that almost every lawyer should know, that from the 1930s, the Great Depression, in the United States, you got to be a millionaire in order to invest in a private company, meaning a company has to become public in order for a normal person to invest. Otherwise, you got to be a millionaire to invest early. Well, that means that normal people could not invest in startups, which is not possible by a construct of law. And that didn't make a lot of sense, right? Certainly no longer longer in the 21st century. So there's a movement of many organizations, AngelList being one, lobbying the Obama administration to see through a component of the law that allows anyone and everyone to invest in very new businesses, startups, as well as restaurants or whatever.
Was that a vision that really captured your attention? Is that when you thought for Republic, you would make it the Amazon of private investing?
Yes, that's when I thought that indeed that would be possible once and for all, that the potential of investing is for everyone to do it. And I still remember a couple years in high school and in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, and you hear stories about Google and eBay and all of these tech companies. And I asked my dad and my oldest brother, how come they're not investing? And they just kind of like laugh and they're like, well, because we're not rich, this is more for like rich people, but you see it in the headline news everywhere. Imagine that, how different it would be if children, young people, and adults everywhere feel that what's in the headline news of the Wall Street Journal are things that if they want to, they can access. I think so at the end of the day, is everyone wants to feel connected. And I think that if it would enable people to have a sense of equity, of financial capability, that would lead to a lot of good. And that's when I was like, whoa, this is exactly a business model that is large enough that I can see myself building for a lifetime, rather than just building things and creating things for the ultra wealthy, which had been pretty much my entire world before that, except for academia that was in business. But anything in business that I worked at that was not a nonprofit or academia was involving the ultra rich. And that's all fine and good. But I think here's an opportunity to do things that has a global scale that I think is incredibly impactful for me.
And you had this incredible vision. You brought it to Naval and the board to ask for permission to launch Republic. How was that conversation like? Because it sounds like they were very supportive and they even gave you a very large investment. You didn't even have to raise funds for the first year. And you employ employees for AngelList too.
Yes. So I think in life, not just what you do, but how you do things. And at the end of the day, it's all about human relationship. So in any job, one of the things that I value so much about my upbringing with hardworking parents is that you just got to do the job well, even if you don't like it. And the moment that you stop liking it and not going to do it well, tell people that you're not liking it and that you don't want to do it anymore. But if you're going to do something, just do it well. So anything that I touch, including at AngelList, I just like give it my heart and soul. And out of that, also a sense of gratitude that here I am, one of the leading tech company. And I hope that it showed that the relationship that I had with my colleagues, including Naval, etc., was generally very positive. Because, if you do your best and if you're nice about it, then it's tend to be positive. But I think the moment was there for me to leave AngelList regardless, because I already didn't feel that it was meaningful enough. AngelList is for millionaires to invest on. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to approach Naval about this and I'm going to let him know that it's time for me to leave. But there's this business model that I think that AngelList would not be able to execute and that I would love to be able to take it on and do it. And I didn't know if he and the board would say yes or no, but they looked at it and they know that they wouldn't be able to do it. And they had enough confidence in me as, almost like their card in this industry to back and to support. And yeah, something that I'm just incredibly grateful for because they didn't have to, and yet they did that.
I want to go a little further along in your seeking investor journey, because you shared before in your second year, you wanted to raise funds from VCs. You reached over 250 VCs and you only got 2 of the 8 months. Why do you think it was such a struggle to get them on board when you had people like Naval on board already?
When you go past year one, people want to see traction in a startup for them to invest, meaning they would invest if they think that this business has a path to becoming a very, very large company. Well, we were building an exceedingly difficult business model in that for anyone to invest, but people don't know what investing means. And it's so new that there wasn't that market. So even we gained some validation in terms of the company that we raised for, but it was not super meaningful because the industry industry which is that slow. And the second factor may very well be that what we were doing to some would seem to be doing what VC would do, meaning is it competitive? Because if people can raise from the retail public, why would they raise from VC? So there's no question. In fact, I had one VC who told me, he was like, love you and the team and what you guys have done, but we're not in the business of backing companies that would put us out of business. I only had that once though. And I appreciate the candidness. And the third reason is that there was at the time, and even now, there's so many changes in innovation and in society that there's so many things that maybe would be more obvious, less regulated. To give you an example, selling things or even Uber and Airbnb are far less regulated. What we do in selling securities investments to retail investors, say for running a nuclear plant or the hospital, there aren't too many business models that are more regulated than republics. Because of that, it was deemed to have too many hurdles and challenges. But I didn't mind it. I mean, was it tiresome? Yes, but every conversation, every note that you get is an opportunity to understand why people did not see things in your shoes, in your perspectives, and learn what you can from it and just move on. And if I may hark back a little bit to my heritage, my parents immigrating from Vietnam, is that, as you know, most people know, Vietnam was a country that went through a lot of wars. You know, back generations ago, wars between Vietnam and China, then Vietnam and French, then the Japanese, and of course, the American, the US, the Vietnam War. And through all of that, I think there's an ethos. I don't know if it's through everyone, but it's certainly through my parents, which is you don't hold grudges because you can't. How can you go through so many things and just be hold grudges all the time? And the second one is that you just gotta move forward. That's life. You know, in the weird way, traffic in Hanoi or Saigon, this chaos is one thing. There's only one way to do it, right? Don't look too much to the left or to the right, and certainly don't look back. Just keep biking forward. And I think that's how you got to approach life and challenges. And the no's that you get in life is take what you want from it, just keep on moving forward positively, and maybe they'll come back eventually.
So you kept moving forward. And the second round, when you tried to raise, you said you were more efficient, you focused on blockchain VCs. You pitched 25 and you got 6 on board in a month. What was the difference?
Yes, the difference was that the crypto and blockchain industry had and has a problem, that is regulatory novelty. As it turns out, Republic and my background and what we had done with startup is also a framework to fix some important issues, address some important issues within the blockchain industry in the United States. Because of that, Binance, what the largest crypto exchange, saw potential in what we did and came in to back us together with a few of the major firms, many of which are based out of Asia, FBG, Gen Fund, etc.
What were some of the issues that they saw you as mutually solving?
The issue is that for a new project in blockchain, when you issue your tokens, the tokens are almost certainly considered securities under US laws and likely under many countries' laws as well. So they were selling it to anyone, everyone who wanted to buy. Well, the SEC said no and took some really harsh step against some project. So we had the legal framework to allow people to sell private securities to anyone and everyone. That same law applies to selling tokens that are deemed to be securities to anyone and everyone. So there's only two options. Either you use Republic and you can reach everyday folks, or you can say bye-bye and not involve all of the engineers from Stanford, from Berkeley, who are not millionaires, and anyone who's not a millionaire. And that means that there's no adoption for the project and for the industry. So we hold a pretty important key on compliant token distribution in the United States.
So one of the biggest decisions that you always do is to curate the kind of companies that come on board Republic. You often say that it's harder to get on than getting into Harvard. So the obvious question then becomes, what are your criteria for getting onto Republic?
Yes, right now we do so many things. On Republic, you can find real estate, you can find startups, you can find crypto projects. But overall, the curative lens is this. I think we accept less than 3-4% of the applicants. We're an investment platform. We want to make sure that our investors have a decent chance of getting returns on their investment. So obviously, not everyone is going to succeed at building a company. Not all business are going to be bought or going to go public at a huge valuation. So how do we do that curation? Is subjective, but there's some true and try methodology. The easiest way is to interview and look at the people and assess based on their background, on who they are, on how they communicate their vision, whether you think they are going to be able to be the winner in this sector, in this market. If you're going to build the first Vietnamese restaurant chains in Malaysia, or the first Vietnamese restaurant chain in Singapore, well, do they make the most amazing pho? Are there no pho restaurants in Malaysia or Singapore? Maybe that there aren't. Is it just specific to a city? Or do they have a unique recipe that's somehow patented that no one has done before? Do they actually even have a pho shop to know that the recipe is really, really good? So these kind of basic questions also apply to deep tech. Why is the person supposed to be the best in AI when her background is a teacher? And it may be that she was teaching herself at home and therefore have this expertise. It's not about credentials, it's about actual expertise and knowledge and capability. And our team, we came from the venture world, so we are experienced then, compared to the, normal people on how to assess these companies. But there's a big unknown in that we don't want our lens to be the only lens, because we want to make sure that talent, capabilities are also things that depends on where you sit in society. So maybe because I went to Berkeley and because I taught at Stanford, that I assume that people with that background are more talented. But if I'm a single mom saving money every day, be able to see someone and pick out his ability to deal with money in a very smart way that I don't see. And if that person is building a company in accounting, in finance, maybe her lens is far better than my lens as a single mom who has to deal with money in a very difficult way, So we want to make sure that at Republic, aside from applying the traditional lens of credibility, we also leave the door open for new models and for different views and visions to have their moment in the sun and to be validated out.